Okay, so this video is about Psalm 106. It's a continuation of Psalm 105 about how God did miraculous things in Egypt, and it's about Moses splitting the Red Sea and a deeper meaning behind all that. And I'm going to actually talk about how this ties into people who see miracles and see miraculous things, okay? Who can utter the mighty acts of the Lord? Who can show forth his kindness, his praise? Our fathers understood not thy wonders in Egypt. They remembered not the multitude of thy mercies, but provoked him at the sea. And it goes into how he did all these miracles in Egypt. He rebuked the sea also. It was dried up. So he led them through the depths and through the wilderness. And the waters covered their enemies. There was not one of them left. They soon forgot his works. They waited not for his counsel. Thus they changed their glory into similitude of an ox that eateth grass. So this is obviously talking about how God did all these miracles in Egypt, and not even a day later, they started murmuring and complaining, okay? They thought, oh, cool, that was awesome, God, that was amazing. And like, not even a day later, they went back to similitude of the ox that eat grass. Okay, this ox eating grass, the similitude, okay, it's talking about how people just go back to their old ways immediately. Okay, they go back to what they're doing, did all the time before. Okay, and this has a lot to do with how people are now. Okay, in real life, people can see some crazy things. Okay, they can see ghosts, they can see UFOs, they can see demons, they can see possibly angels, and most of the time they will go right back to what they did before. They'll compartmentalize it, they'll table it as some weird story to tell around the campfire, and then they'll just forget about it and go back to their regular lives. That is the last thing that you should be doing if you see something miraculous or supernatural, okay? That happened to me. I was a long time ago. I don't see any of this stuff anymore. I was seeing lots of weird things. I know there were demons now, but I didn't know that at the time. Okay, and for a long time I just put it off. I didn't know what to do about it, so I just compartmentalized it. It was just a weird thing that was happening to me, and it was horrifying. But I really just wanted to go back to similitude of an ox. I wanted to go back to my old life, and I didn't really want to think about it. But eventually, I really had to start facing the fact that this was serious, and something very serious was happening to me. It's not just some weird little thing that you're seeing. This is very serious. Don't you think it's weird? What are these things? Question what these things are. Where are they coming from? Don't put it off as some weird, scary story. This is serious. God, obviously, when you see these things, God knows that you're seeing them. He is even allowing you to see this for a reason. Most of the time, people just think this creepy little story to tell people, or they just put it off, or they don't tell anyone, okay? But you have to figure out what's going on here. And what does this have to do with your afterlife, okay? People never connect those dots. This is something that is the supernatural world exists, okay? The spirit world exists. That is something that should be sinking into your brain. And if their spirit world exists, what's going to happen to you when you die? Okay? God can allow you to see some crazy stuff and experience crazy stuff. Don't go back to your regular life don't put it off like nothing happened. Don't go back to watching TV and watching sports and go hanging out with your friends at the bar, whatever you're doing before, like the similitude of an ox. That's what that means. It's just going back to your sameness, your same old life. This is something seriously going on, and it's not sinking in that this is serious, okay? It's like, well, that was weird, but instead of figuring out what's going on in the afterlife, it's more important for me to watch TV. That's what's really important, what's real. Not trying to figure out what's really going on in the spirit world just ignore it. It has nothing to do with you. Don't worry about it. It's more important for you to watch TV. And even if God does do a miracle for you, you appreciate it for like a day and you go right back to your old life. And I wanted to bring up something else. They forgot God, their Savior, which had done great things in Egypt, wondrous works in the land of Ham, and terrible things by the Red Sea. Okay, this is talking about how, this is not just talking about the Israelites witnessing this stuff, it's talking about how the Egyptians were witnessing this stuff, okay? To them it was horrible and terrible, but it was good for God's people, okay? Now this is about how people can view the same event, and it can be evil to one person and a good thing to another person. And good example of this is, when people see, they say they see statues crying or moving around, religious figures moving around, You might view this as a gift from a miracle from God. I view this as demonic. Okay, some person can view the same event, and it's evil to some people, and it's a gift from God to another group of people. You might view this as wonderful. I view this as terrible. But even if God does do a miracle in life, you want more, or you want more. You murmur. All right, you complain that you want more. These Israelites in the desert were ridiculous. Okay, God did all the stuff for them to save them, and they're immediately complaining about it right after it happened. Okay, it reminds me of spoiled little kids. Little kids, we want manna. We're hungry. God gave them food. Oh, now we want quail. Okay, it's like, we want pizza. We want McDonald's. Now we want Taco Bell. It's like nothing's ever enough. They just want more and more and more. Let's reread this. But lusted exceedingly in the wilderness, and tempted God in the desert. And he gave them their request, but sent leanness to their soul. Okay, this is about how God, you can feed your flesh, but your soul could be starving to death. Okay, sometimes what you have to deny your flesh so your soul can live. All right, don't starve your soul so your body can be satisfied. Like, if you're craving alcohol, if you're craving drugs, or if you're craving the sins of the flesh, it's gonna kill your soul and starve your soul. And then it says, they forgot God their Savior, which had done wonderful things, great things in Egypt, wondrous works. So, again, I'm gonna reiterate. So when something's supernatural, if you're not saved and something supernatural happened, take it seriously. It's not just some little thing that is happening. God is allowing you to experience that for a reason, hopefully to wake you up about what's really happening here. Yes, most of the time this stuff is probably demonic, okay? But so if you know that demons are real, it should lead you to God, okay? It should lead you to God somehow. There's not everything is just evil, some evil weird stuff to tell around the campfire. It's serious. It's way more serious than you hanging out and doing whatever you were doing before. Okay? Sometimes this stuff can slap people in the face. And hopefully this stuff leads you to God somehow. And there are two different types of people in this world. When they experience something supernatural, they either ignore it, okay, or they get really obsessed with it, but it doesn't lead them to God. Okay, don't you think it's weird that these things, the spirit world exists? Aren't you concerned about where your spirit is going to be when you die? Okay, it's serious, right? And I really wanted to talk about, how the Egyptians, they got killed in the Red Sea. So it talks about how people think they say that their wheels got stuck in the mud and they couldn't go, and then they got drowned. Okay, this is very serious. Okay, there's some deep meaning behind this. So back in the ancient world, you crossing like a river or a sea, especially by horse-drawn chariots, was a theme in the ancient world. It meant to go from one side to the other, like the afterlife. Okay, there was a journey you had to take. And so one side of the river represents God's land, God's promised land, and the other represents, hell, okay? So, or the earth, okay? So, and by the way, I'm going to throw in some pictures of a very common theory of where the Israelites crossed the Red Sea. Lots of people think it's in this area because there seems to be like a dried pathway from one side to the other. Or there was one. So I'm going to use these pictures, and you can kind of see where this trail leads up to, and it turned into a beach. Okay, it turned into a bay. All right, so I think that's a pretty interesting theory. I thought it was pretty cool. And also, there's this, they found chariot wheels of gold in the Red Sea, so that people say this is evidence of this really happening. Okay, you can see it in geography. God leaves plenty of evidence that this happens. And yes, I know people fight about if this is really evidence or not. People fight about everything. Okay, what's happening here is when the meaning behind their wheels getting stuck in the middle of the Red Sea, and they didn't make it the whole way. Okay, you have to make it all the way to the other side. There is no halfway to heaven. Halfway to heaven just means you made it all the way to hell. Okay, there is no halfway to heaven. You can be partially right about a whole bunch of things, but if it doesn't lead you to God, it's always all the way to hell. Okay. Just like with the ghosts thing, the ghosts and the UFO thing. Lots of people think that they're demons, but it doesn't lead them to Christ. Okay, that's halfway. That's God has that theme in the Bible about being stuck in the mud. Okay, just like the Egyptians got stuck in the mud. Okay, you not making it halfway doesn't mean anything. Okay, you could be right about all your theories, but if it doesn't bring you to Christ, it doesn't matter if you are right. Just like a lot of these false religions, they have truth in them. They preach about peace. They preach about being nice to each other. That's half right. Without Jesus, it's all the way wrong. Okay, there's no such thing as halfway to heaven. Halfway to heaven just means all the way to hell. Okay, you have to use your evidence and bring it to the foot of the cross, and so other people can get there too. There's a lot of deep meaning with when the Egyptians got stuck halfway between the promised land. Okay, and I wanted to bring up something else, so I'm going to bring up the plagues. Okay, and I really wanted to talk about this, so we're going to go back to the plagues. So Moses, this was right after the frogs, right when the frogs were happening, the plague of the frogs. So Moses went to the Pharaoh, and he said, the Pharaoh was like, please get rid of these frogs, get rid of them. And Moses said, okay, we'll get rid of the frogs. When do you want me to get rid of the frogs? And the Pharaoh said, tomorrow. And there's this whole, philosophy of how Pharaoh wanted one more night with the frogs. He wanted one more night with his plague. Okay, sometimes you don't have tomorrow. There is no halfway. There's right now, and that's all you got sometimes. Okay, don't depend on some future thing to happen. You got to accept Christ now, today. Okay, don't wait for. I know I keep saying this in my videos. Don't wait for some crazy end time stuff to start happening to accept Christ. Okay, because in my opinion, this stuff has always been happening. The end times is always happening. Okay, I'm not saying there might be a one final event, but the world is constantly in a state of chaos and death. Okay, the end times is always here. It's now. Okay, don't wait for some miraculous thing to happen for you to accept Christ. You gotta do it now. And also don't spend one more night with your plague. Don't spend one more night. Oh, tomorrow I'll get good with God. Tomorrow I'll get rid of my drinking habit. I'll spend one more night with a bottle. I'll spend one more night with him or one more night with her. Okay? No more nights. Do it now. Get rid of your plague now. Do not say tomorrow. Do not be like the Pharaoh and say tomorrow. Okay, now. And God talks about this fasting. Okay, God uses play on words. Okay, when Jesus approached this person who had problem with demons, he said the only way to get rid of this kind is through prayer and fasting. Okay, God uses play on words, but one of the many meanings behind fasting means you need to do this quickly. Okay, you need to get rid of these things now. Fast. Okay, quickly. Not tomorrow, now. Alright, I really wanted to bring that up. Okay, and I wanted to bring something else up. So it's talking about Moses and the Red Sea. But on verse 17, the earth opened up and swallowed up Dathan and covered the company of Abram. The fire was kindled in their company, and the flame burned up the wicked. This is talking about how God's people were swallowed up by water. God's evil people were swallowed up by water, and they were swallowed up by land and fire. Okay, this is God doing all of the elements. Okay, and there's also a theory about how God split the Red Sea. It wasn't just water manipulation; it was wind manipulation. Okay. This is earth, wind, fire, water manipulation by a deity. And God commanding water what to do is always since in the book of Genesis. He commanded the water what to do. And then Jesus, because Jesus is God, he commanded the waters to calm down. So a God that manipulates the four elements, earth, wind, fire, water, is a thing in the ancient world. So of course God is talking about that here. Okay. And I wanted to bring up this one more thing. A God splitting water. Everyone understood a God splitting water, okay? It's from the beginning of time. These gods are manipulating water and splitting water and using the element manipulation, okay? Out of them, this God just became Poseidon. When the Romans came and the Greeks came, these Sumerian gods became Poseidon and stuff like that. Okay, these gods are all over the place now. They're not the God of the Bible, are they? So guess who they are. Alright? So the rest of Psalm 106 is pretty bleak. So it says they joined themselves onto Baal Peor and ate sacrifices of the dead, their sons and their daughters unto devils, and shed innocent blood, even the blood of their sons and their daughters, whom they sacrificed to the idols of Canaan, and the land was polluted with blood. And they were defiled with their own works, and went a whoring with their own inventions. Okay, so this is talking about a lot of stuff right here, okay? And how does this, I want to tie into how this is going into the similitude of the Nox again, and how this ties into you now. Okay, and I know people are going to say, well, people don't sacrifice their kids to Satan anymore. Alright, you are spiritually doing that. First of all, you could say abortion is a sacrifice, a literal sacrifice to the devil. But you plopping your kids down in front of the TV or letting other people raise your kids outside of God is just doing it spiritually. You are spiritually handing off your children to the enemy, okay? You plopping your kids down in front of the TV for 10 hours every day and letting the TV raise your kids, which is none of these shows are about God, okay? Nothing on TV is about Jesus. Are you kidding me? Very rarely. And so they get spiritually starved. Why do parents do this? Why do people have abortions? And why do parents plop their kids down in front of the TV for 10 hours a day? It's because of the similitude of the Nox. People want to have an abortion because they want to go back to their same old life. They don't want to be bothered. They don't want their sports to be bothered. They don't want to be bothered with not going to the bar anymore. They don't want to interrupt their sin patterns, their same old sin patterns. They want to be left alone so they can do their sin and not be bothered with raising a kids. And even if you have kids, that is still happening. You don't want to be bothered with entertaining your kids or teaching your kids about God. You want to go watch TV and go to the bar or go to the football games yourself, so you let the TV raise your kids. That is still the same thing as you sacrificing your sons and daughters to the devil. Okay, it's the exact same thing. You're just doing it spiritually. See, but we're mingled among the heathen and learned their work, so they started doing what everyone else was doing, and that's still a similitude of an ox. They just started doing what everyone else was doing. And thus they were defiled with their own works and went a whoring in their own inventions. I wanted to bring up your own inventions and trapping you and how your own ways are evil. Okay, so I wanted to bring something up. So are these gods, these old gods? There's a debate between Christians and all kinds of people if these things are based on demons or if these people are just making things up. It doesn't matter. Okay, it doesn't matter if you think these are demons they are worshiping or if they're just making stuff up. Okay, you inventing gods and worshiping fake gods is the same thing as the devil anyway. If I make up a god right now, okay, I'm gonna make up a god right now. His name is Marshall. He's the god of French fries. If I start worshiping this god that I just made up, and especially if I get other people to start worshiping it, it's still demonic. It doesn't matter if you think these things are demons, or if you think these guys were just making things up. It's the same thing. You making things up, or you worshiping a devil, it's the same thing. It's not different, okay? Because you're ignoring the God of the Bible, so it's always evil. It doesn't matter if you think they're just making things up, or if these things are demons. It doesn't matter. It's both evil. You making up stuff is the same thing as a demon telling you to do it. Okay, and speaking of, I am totally going to bring this up. I'm going to bring up the Enuma Elis, and I'm going to bring up the Gilgamesh, okay? Oh man, talk about little kid stuff, okay? When I mean a little kid, I mean a very disturbed little kid, but still a little kid. It is like a little kid made up a story and drew pictures for a story, and it's just so respectable now. It's like ridiculous. Okay, so I want to talk about something. So if you look into the art of the ancient world, it gets more and more involved over time. These gods were first depicted as being like stick figures, and then they started getting more 3D and 4D, and they started getting, they started adding more depth to these pictures. And forget about now, because I already said this before, every single thing we have on TV, every single cartoon character and superhero is based off of these guys, okay? So, these gods, half the time they're drawn like stick figures. And when these gods first started coming out, okay, these stories about these gods were just nonsense. It didn't even make sense. It is honestly like a 10-year-old drew a bunch of gods and made up a story. Okay, like the Gilgamesh and all those stories, they barely even make sense. It just has a bunch of violence in it, and it's hard to follow. And it's like, that's honestly like a 10-year-old who was drawing and writing a story, and we're just supposed to respect that. Like, it's just like so respectable when it's just garbage. It's like, it's so many people respect the Gilgamesh and stuff more than the Bible. It's honestly like a little kid wrote that thing and drew it, and all the art with it is like stick figures, okay, because it's a bunch of child's play, okay. And over time I got more and more involved. And it's so funny because reading the Gilgamesh and Enuma Elis is like watching one of these superhero movies or movies today. There's so much violence going on. Everyone has supernatural powers and supernatural enchanted weapons, and there's gross sex involved, and there's so much of that going on. I don't even know what's happening in the storyline. That's what the Enuma Elis and Gilgamesh read like, okay? It is just a bunch of nonsense. It's like a very violent nowadays 10-year-old wrote it. It is a fever dream nightmare of violence and sex. It's disgusting. And people are like, well, we now know it became before the Bible, so we respect it. I am just like, wow, that is garbage. And by the way, the Gilgamesh was only discovered 100 years ago or so. And the Bible's been available to mankind since the beginning of time. So what has really been older? What has been more available longer to the people? The Bible, okay? This is all about using your creativity and using your God-given creativity to glorify the devil instead of to glorify God. Just like nowadays, all these movies are super, they're super CGI, they look really cool and everything, and everyone wants to go see this stuff, but God doesn't get any of that. God doesn't get cool movies with cool CGI and all that stuff. A little bit here and there, okay? But most of the time, all that creativity goes to the devil. And that's exactly what I mean by twisted creativity and twisted imagination. And what God means by using your imagination for twisted works in this psalm, okay? It's evil. You're supposed to be using your creativity. I think, and it's sad because you're allowed to be creative, okay? You're allowed to, and you can even use TV and internet to glorify God, okay? You're involved in the world. You're in this world too. You're allowed to use that stuff to glorify God. That's what you're supposed to do. And that's exactly why Joseph had his head in the clouds. He had an imagination for God. You're supposed to have an imagination. You're supposed to be creative for God. But that's not what's happening. People use their God-given talents to make violent video games and to make horrible music, okay? It's all that all that creativity and art goes right out the window, and it's sad. And that's exactly what God is talking about in this psalm, okay? Spilling your blood and guts and all your works for your imagination for the devil. So I think I'm going to end the psalm there. The psalm is pretty dark. It's because that's what God does in the Bible. So the psalm before this was about how God was proud of his people. It talked about Joseph and his imagination and how wonderful his people were. And now this is about the downfall, okay? It's like good. It does a good version and a bad version. It does an uplifting story, then it does a reminder story about how God's people totally lost their way. It does that back and forth all throughout the Bible, okay? It does blessing and curses, okay, to keep you leveled. Anyways, that's it for now. So please think about this stuff, guys, and thank you.